Welcome to the Listen for Life podcast with Genevieve Richardson. Genevieve is a speech-language pathologist rehabilitating adults with communication challenges after a stroke or due to a neurological impairment. Get equipped with knowledge from experts in the field and professionals you need to know. We'll hear stories and experiences from others who are navigating life with aphasia. So, put your earphones in and take a walk outside. This isn't just a podcast. This is a community, a resource, and a support system. We're in this together. Do life.
Welcome to the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast. Today, I'm happy to welcome back to the studio Anna McMaster. And Anna is here in Austin, Texas, and she is a franchise owner for Care Patrol South Austin. What is Care Patrol? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. And the reason we're talking about it is there may be a circumstance where either you or your loved one can't continue to live safely in your home. So, what are your options? And are those choices permanent? Like you make this decision and that's how it's going to be the rest of your life, or, what is the in between part on that? And the other thing we're going to get into is what is a certified senior, and I'm just going to screw this up, advisor. Why couldn't I remember advisor? And the other part is, what is a certified senior advisor and why does this matter? Why do you need to speak to a placement agent that has this additional certification? Without further ado, and I'm so grateful Anna's coming back on with us. And just a little hint, Anna was, I want to say, number 9 or 10 guest. And Anna, when this airs, you're going to be in the hundreds on this podcast. So welcome back, Anna McMaster.
Thank you, and congratulations. I'm so happy you're doing this, and I know so many people need this and need the information. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And you and I met here through mutual friends who are like in the senior space, in the rehabilitation space. You and I both go to a lot of networking events because that's how we share our mission with other professionals. And then, by extension, the people that they interact with. And what I loved about your story is how you came to be a certified senior advisor and an owner of a Care Patrol business. Can you tell us a little bit about Care Patrol first? And then let's get into a little bit of how you came to be here.
Yeah, well, so Care Patrol, our mission is to help families find safe senior care options. So we help with independent living, assisted living, memory care, and in-home care. We kind of describe ourselves as a real estate agent / social worker. It's a completely free service, but we guide families through touring, through vetting communities, and ultimately making that choice for their loved one. And I have to reiterate, it is completely free for the families we work with. We get paid by the providers in our network. So I've been doing this now for just over 5 years. And I came into this originally because I was a caregiver for my father-in-law, and my husband and I had gone through the process of trying to find a memory care for him. We did it all on our own. We had no help whatsoever, and we made some really big mistakes. Eventually, we did find the right place for him, and he lived out his last days in a safe environment. But it took a lot of stress and emotions and all the things. So when I found Care Patrol, I thought, how great is this that I can support families through a very, very difficult and emotional journey. And so Peter, my father-in-law, was my original inspiration. But now after 5 years, you can imagine how many families that I've worked with. And I'm just so grateful to be in this position.
I love how there's a personal story. It's not like you thought, oh, I'm going to change my career or I'm going to do something new. You had a family circumstance that brought you into this space. And I dare say you're inspired because just who you are as an individual and the care and compassion you provide to the families that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important in healthcare to have a why. Why are you doing this? Because it's a hard job, and I am constantly inspired by other people's why, particularly hospice nurses and hospice social workers and those people who are really dealing with some difficult emotional situations. It's the why is what keeps us going. The why is what keeps our empathy and compassion levels up. And yeah, like I said, just really grateful to be doing this.
So let's get into some of the details about why would a family be speaking to someone like yourself as a placement specialist. One story comes to mind, a family of mine in the recent past. The wife was still living. She was widowed, but where she lived, way north Austin, she was isolated. Yes, she could drive, but she had aphasia on top of that. And, so she had limited ability to communicate. And because of where she lived, she didn't get to practice. And she just got quieter and quieter. And it was harder for the family to get to her. And she had a dog. So they started looking at placement. But what came up for this family was, well, who's going to take her dog? And she would be devastated to not be able to move with her dog, as an example. So, can we start with my story and kind of walk through what you would want to know from the family to help them start this process and looking at placement?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in a situation like that, I bet a family would Google senior living Austin and get 100 different options, right? But if they find me, our first call is going to be, what is mom's medical need, geographical needs, financial needs, social, spiritual, all of those points. I'm going to put together a short list for her and the family. I'm going to set up tours. I'm going to go with them on those tours and help them narrow it down from a Google search of 100 plus communities to 3 or 4 or 5 that fit her needs. And I think with someone like that, often they go, well, I guess it's just a nursing home or it's assisted living. Well, no, actually, there's some really great, vibrant senior communities. You can have a dog, you can get some help, but more than anything, you're out there socializing and maintaining your independence for as long as possible. Austin, I love the dog example. Austin is such a dog city, so I can't speak for the rest of the nation, but I don't have any communities that say no to dogs as long as they're a certain weight limit and trained and all of that. But I think you've touched on a couple of really key pieces of, that socialization need, that mental health, that being not being isolated, and then also the companionship of an animal. That's so important when someone's been widowed or they're just an older adult. And that to me, I hear that story and I think, oh, she would do great in an independent living community where she will just have kind of a cushion of care around her, but really thrive.
So, let's talk about
Yeah.
permanency. Uh, if Could she try out a community for fit without committing, without I know there's different models out there. I came from Southern California and they had a big model where families would basically sell the home and invest all of their saving, all their investment money from their home into a community. And that's a pretty permanent, like you are really jumping in the deep end as far as commitment goes to a place. I know that there's other levels for that. Can you go into that a little bit more? Do you have to jump into something like that, or is there an in between?
Yeah, so the model you're talking about is a CCRC. So the idea is you pay the big upfront fee and then start an independent living with a monthly fee and then kind of move through the level of care. So on a campus like that, they'll have independent assisted memory care and skilled nursing. But that doesn't fit everybody's needs for exactly the reasons that you just said. That's a big investment, it's a big commitment. So For the most part, the other places that we deal with are on leases, so 12-month lease with a 30-day notice period. You'll pay a community fee up front, which is a deposit, just like going into an apartment. And then if anything happens, you hate it, you need to move to a higher level of care, you give a 30-day notice and you're out. I think that that works really well for people whose family members are kind of on the border, maybe between independent or assisted in memory care, where another move might be in their future, but they're not committed to anything. This is not a permanent, life-changing financial decision. You can try it out. If it doesn't work, there are other options.
I like that, because that's a big commitment. And I would think knowing that it doesn't have to be a permanent condition takes some of that overwhelm off, especially if, let's say, it's adult children that are trying to help manage this for mom. Yeah, I like knowing that there are options, and throughout the country there tend to be various options, right? Like you said, different levels of care, different levels of financial commitment, that kind of thing. Are all places multi-level as far as they have an independent living and then assisted living and then maybe a memory care component? How does that work?
Yeah, we do have a few places where they have independent, assisted, and memory care, and those are three very different parts of the community. We have places that independent and assisted are blended. So you move into one apartment, you can start as an independent resident and then build care in as you need to without having to move to another apartment. The only kind of rare thing, or at least here in Austin, is having a skilled nursing facility attached. So for the most part, places are independent, assisted, and or memory care, but not skilled nursing. And there are places that are standalone memory care communities, and those ones can be really fantastic because that's all they do. They just focus on memory care. And I love those kind of models as well.
Well, memory care in particular, it's such a specialty because we know that there's so many different kinds of dementia, all with their own set of symptoms, needs, and the care providers, need to be able to flex and adjust. And it just helps kind of systematize. That's a funny word to say as far as care is concerned, but families, you do want that. If your person is going into memory care, you need to know that they've got your person and they can cope and pivot and provide the kind of care and support that your loved one needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I always encourage clients to ask when we're touring the places that are assisted living and memory care, how are the caregivers assigned? So, are there people who are working in memory care and assisted living, or are there caregivers who memory care is all they do? And it's important because some places they require their memory care caregivers to have, certified dementia training, continuing education units, and that's very, very different than assisted living. So I have had feedback on some of my places that have all the levels of care where they say memory care kind of feels like an afterthought to the fancy independent wing. So I always encourage people to ask, how are the caregivers in memory care different from what's going on in assisted living?
I think that's a smart question to ask. So let's talk through this as if I were looking for maybe independent living, maybe to assisted living for, I hate to say it, mom and dad, one of my
Yeah.
parents. And if I am going to start the search in a city, how do I even go about finding someone like yourself to help? I may not, hopefully in my community now, they understand that there are placement partners to help them, like yourself and Care Patrol. I get on Google, and like you said earlier, I start looking at places and I go, oh my God, there's 100 places. How do I narrow it down? And then an ad for Care Patrol pops up. And I go, huh, what's this? what would I be seeing like on the Care Patrol site that makes me go, oh, that's who I need to call first?
Well, I think
What are your thoughts on
yeah,
that?
I think first of all, you always want to be looking for a local resource. And one of the big things about the Care Patrol website in particular is that if you put in your zip code, you will get a local person. So you want to be searching for local placement agents, and Google will bring those up. We also have an organization called the NPRA, which is our national group of placement agents, and their website will have everybody in your local area. And there's also looking for certified senior advisors in your area as well. The website will bring up your local resources. And I really, really encourage, I keep putting that word local out there, but I really encourage people to work with local
Yeah.
people who live in the area, who are real human beings, who know what they're talking about. They're in and out of these places all the time. We get a lot of referrals just from word of mouth as well. So I always encourage people, talk to your friends, talk to your people at church, talk to your doctors, talk to your home health to really figure out who are the local people that will help you in the way that you need to be helped.
Being a franchise owner in Care Patrol, how are you different than somebody else in a competing company?
Well, Care Patrol was started by a licensed medical social worker. And although they don't require people who are buying the franchisee to have a medical background, they do require us to go through vigorous training. And they also require that we get the certified senior advisor certification before we even open. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me when I was looking around, was that they don't just sell a territory and give it to somebody off the street. They really want people who are going to take this job very seriously and have the appropriate training, because we're advising families. It's not easy, and they want to make sure we're doing it ethically and, to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely. What was while you were going through that certification training? Because I this is actually a relatively new concept to me. I only learned about it, from having met you, and I only know a couple of others here in Austin. What was your biggest takeaway from that kind of training?
I loved it. I thought it was just such a holistic training course. So there's 7 or 8 different books. And by the way, I fully nerded out. I got my highlighters. I was doing the online courses. I went crazy. But it was holistic because it's not just about the medical piece. It was also about learning about Medicare and Medicaid, learning about veterans benefits, learning about kind of how do people pay for care? How can we guide them through that? Also, I had no idea before I started that there were so many different kinds of dementia, right? And how those dementias present are very, very different. So I went from being just somebody who thought, oh, I get Alzheimer's, that's dementia, right? That's the one. No. It was an entire book dedicated to the types of dementia, how they present, what parts of the brain they affect. And ultimately, that's really helped me. When I'm talking to people, I am not medical, I'm not a clinical person, right? But I have the knowledge to point them in the right direction to get them to the right place clinically, socially, all of that piece. Had I not done the certification and just started this cold, I would have made a lot of mistakes.
And that's exactly what a family is trying to avoid.
Exactly.
So that's why having a certified senior advisor, someone like yourself who actually has some family history, that you walk this walk before you got into the business, I think is so important. And I also think that you can tune into some of the subtleties a family might need, whether it's psychosocial, whether it's care, or for my community, maybe there's aphasia, there's some kind of a language impairment. And maybe some communities can cater a little bit better to that, or they're more open to learning. And I think that's where someone like yourself can really help guide a family in that circumstance.
Yeah, I love that, and I get so many phone calls that have nothing to do with placement. People have just been referred to me as a connector, as somebody who knows the industry. And ultimately, if we're not looking at placement, I want to make sure that that family has all of the resources available to them and they understand what's out there so they can find help for their loved one. And that's one of the best feelings that I get is when somebody who maybe I didn't place will call me and say, "Thank you so much for connecting me with this speech therapist. Thank you for connecting me with this hospice." Because if otherwise you're on your own, navigating the
Hmm.
American healthcare system is not easy.
No, it's not. I mean, if you were just to Google hospice in Austin,
Yeah.
I hate to know how many, 30, I dare,
We're closer to
there's a
100 at
lot.
this point.
I,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
right. So imagine. And anyway, hospice is a whole
That's
other
a whole
topic,
other
but that's
topic.
that's not related. That's not related to but to your point, you are well connected, and that's why it's so important to work with a local agent who walks these facilities every day.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we are not legally able to do placement into a skilled nursing facility because of
Good point.
Medicare and Medicaid laws, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to still try and get that family pointed in the right direction because we are in and out of these skilled nursing buildings all the time. So even that I'm happy. I'm always happy to give somebody a little bit of my time to make sure that they're on the right path. And that can be a real gift to them. And it makes me feel very happy for what I'm doing.
Well, yes, I remember a not so distant phone call I made to you, Anna, and asked for some advice, even though it wasn't directly in your wheelhouse. And because of your connections and knowledge and compassion, you were amazingly helpful.
Good.
So I'm always grateful for that. So let's take this one step further. If I'm looking to place one of my parents, I want to know that where they're going is
Mhm.
safe because I know that when I was looking for an in law of my family, when we started looking at skilled nursing facilities, that is a whole rabbit hole. And I know I'm talking about skilled nursing here, but I know it applies to all communities. I was specifically looking at skilled nursing and holy cow, like you can get on some website and you're going to get wild or comparing websites, you're going to get wildly different ratings,
Mhm.
safety, ability to accommodate,
Yeah.
reviews. What do you and what do Care Patrol take into account when you're recommending these facilities to families?
We go onto the HHS website, which is the Health and Human Services website, and we read all of the
Ah,
care and violation history of any community that we recommend. And there are some violations we see on there that we go, okay, it was a fire extinguisher and then they fixed it. And then we see things like medication mismanagement, elder abuse, and those are the things that we go, you need to know about this and you need to know that this was in their past and we need to figure out if this is the place for you, if how have they rectified this. But it's always something that we are very, very upfront about. We take that very seriously. Going back to what you said about reviews, I really just don't give a lot of weight to Google reviews anymore because many communities will incentivize their staff to write reviews. So it looks
oh,
like they have 117 five-star reviews, but it's actually staff members who are getting a little incentivization to put that five-star review up there. And also, you'll get disgruntled employees as well. So I just feel like Google doesn't have the actual concrete information that you need. You need to be looking at the state websites to understand the care and violation history. But another thing that we do is follow up. So when we place somebody, we follow up day of the move, week after, month after, 3 months, 6 months, because they are our best source of information, the residents and the families who are in these communities. And they can tell us this is happening, this is great, this is not so great. The salesperson said this, but it didn't happen. So getting that kind of concrete evidence that's away from the Google sphere is really, really helpful for us to continue to make sure that we're on top of all the communities that we're recommending.
Let's talk about the actual process. Once you have that probably initial or maybe a couple of phone calls with a family and you've narrowed it down to a couple facilities, what does it look like going into facility with you? And, because they're meeting with salespeople. Salespeople are trained. And of course, don't be brainwashed by the lovely chandelier in the entryway, right? Sometimes a book is only as good as its cover, right? Don't judge it by its
Yeah.
cover, for
Yeah.
sure. What does going into the facility and talking to that salesperson that's going to give you the tour and to find out if this is the place for mom?
Well, a good salesperson, I don't really need to do much. They do their job, and I kind of step back and just make sure that the family are asking all of the right questions. And I have a full sheet of all the tour questions and topics to go through. And a good salesperson is going to highlight all of those. And if not, I'm going to pop in. On a not so great tour, the salesperson might be amplifying some of the services that they have, maybe not quite telling the entire truth. And I'm going to call them out on that. And, unfortunately, we have had a couple of situations where the salesperson has said, "Oh, yeah, 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 we can do that. That's not a problem." And I've said, but I know it is because a resident who I have in here has said that that's not the actual service being delivered. But the other part of this is that when you put your name and your website into a big, or your name and email into a big website, that goes to all the salespeople, right? And all of those salespeople are going to call you. And what my job is to protect your data and to make sure that the salespeople are aware that I'm working with them so that they are not calling and harassing this family. And look, I'm fortunate. The majority of the salespeople that I work with are absolutely phenomenal, and we work together as a team. But they appreciate that I'm sending them qualified, vetted referrals that they know are seriously interested in the community, as opposed to just a name and an email that they're then just going to have to chase and chase and chase, and the family gets upset, and the salesperson doesn't make a sale, and it's a vicious cycle. Yeah, but I think really it's just about kind of going going beyond the chandelier, maybe is a good way of putting it, and figuring out what that community is actually like, and that's where I can help.
Wonderful. I really like that you kind of pulled back the curtain a little bit on how that whole sales thing happens, because I think many of us who get on somebody's email list, like we've made an inquiry and now we are getting dogged day and night.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, it's like it's overwhelming, it's too much. But when you take a step back and you see, well, this is how the system is, and if you work with someone like yourself at Care Patrol, that can help avoid some of that extra, I was going to say nuisance. That's the word I wanted. Those phone calls, those text messages. Let's just have these folks call you if you're in the South Austin area, South Austin, Texas. If not, get on Care Patrol's website, put in your zip code, and speak to them. Care Patrol is not the only company out there, but if you are, maybe you don't have a franchisee in your neck of the woods. Well, what are you going to look for? I would say a certified senior advisor. At minimum, you need to ask about how do they verify safety and what does the process look like? How is that individual, that company, going to help make your life easier to make the decision for your loved one?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anything else to add on if they don't have a Care Patrol person available to them?
No, I think you've said it perfectly. It's just finding that local person and really asking them, where do you live? Where do you work? Are you going to tour with me? you know, when you say these communities, are you in them all the time? How does this work? Really, really pressing on that. You don't want to deal with somebody in a call center. You want somebody who knows exactly what they're talking about.
Okay, I have one more topic. We didn't talk that we were going to talk. We talked about this before on our, nearly 2 years ago, Anna. I'm the adult child and my loved one needs help. And I think they need a facility. How do we start that conversation? Any tips, tricks, hints to how do we start that?
Well, I always recommend that the adult child do as much research as they can so that when you're having the conversation, you're armed with information and knowledge, right? But it's a conversation that requires being very open and having an open heart and an open mind and listening to what your parent is wanting, but also stressing what they might be needing. And the big piece that we always talk about is safety, right? And I had a client years ago say this to me, and I always think about this. She said, when my kids were teenagers and they were out past curfew, I was so worried. I never knew what was happening. I felt out of control. And now that my mom is in a place that she's unsafe in the middle of the night, I feel the same way, right? And I don't want to be feeling like that. I want her to be safe. So, these conversations can be so difficult, but being proactive, being knowledgeable, being open, really listening is a good way to start it. You might not convince them in one conversation that senior living is for them, but if you can go out there and work with somebody like myself, another local placement agent, and have that extra support, it will be much better than if you said, I Googled assisted living and it's time to go.
Yeah, great point. I mean, there's so many like case studies we could talk through,
Mhm.
but I think we've covered a lot of great information to give people some power and control. And that I work in the aphasia space. When someone, let's say they get aphasia from a stroke, it's sudden.
Yeah.
Something is now controlling your life, and it's so important to get that control back. And I think if you are looking that you need some kind of a placement, temporary, it doesn't have to be a forever home. It can be temporary until you get back on your feet, or to help your loved one with aphasia. Whatever the case, there are options. And how you get control is getting information, knowing there's someone you can call to ask questions of. A very comprehensive website. I do appreciate that with Care Patrol. There's lots of good, because I was on it last week. There's lots of good information in there. And if you're just thinking about it, just read.
Yeah.
Just read up, get armed with information so that you can start your processing, your mental processing, before you take the next step to talking to your loved one, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anna, so good. This was, great, tangible information. Where can people reach you if they want to talk to you?
They can go onto the Care Patrol website and click in their zip code, and hopefully my face will come up. You can always call me. You can always email me, and hopefully you have those. I can give you that information. You can pop it up, but use our website and use it as a resource and a tool. And I would always be happy to help in any way.
Thank you, Anna McMaster. It's been great to see you today. And folks, we will see you next time. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen for Life podcast. We hope you feel empowered and supported. Head over to listenforlifepodcast.com to see the show notes with links and information from today's episode. Do you have a topic, a resource to share, or a guest recommendation? Inquiring minds want to know. Let us know in the comments section. Wishing you a fabulous week.